This is a story about a 69 Road Runner that starts with a 70 Road Runner and ends with a 69 Charger. So I find this ad that's got a listing for a 70 Plymouth Road Runner, 383 car, automatic. It runs. So no picture, not much on details. It's fairly close by. I mean, within an hour drive. So I have my girlfriend ride with me, and we go up to the high desert, Apple Valley, Hesperia area here in California to look at the car. And I get there, and it's this like lavender purple, kind of like a primer color. It's not shiny, and it's got rattle can Roadrunner stripes on the hood and the cowl. It's got a rally dash TikTok tack in it that worked. The lights worked. The engine ran. It was a little bit rough around the edges, but I thought for the price, it wasn't too bad. It was listed for about $2,500 or so, I think, and I think I offered him $1,800. I think we settled on $2,000 or so. So I dragged the car home. And I get it home, and it had these hideous wheel flares on the back of the car. It was almost a deal breaker, but I drug the car home anyways. I get it home and I start chipping out all the Bondo that's in these rear wheel flares. And of course, it's a total hack job in there. The Roadrunners are kind of semi-skirted, and they had hacked the wheel opening to radius it. And then just like, I don't know, they just butchered this thing and then filled it full of Bondo. And when I got to the passenger side, I could see this seam that went up and over the quarter panel. So this car had been reclipped in the right rear corner, probably from a four-door, patch from a four-door car, which is why they didn't replace the whole quarter panel. Anyways, I black primered the car. I drove it around just locally, not very long. I probably had the car maybe a couple of months or so. When I got into those wheel flares in that quarter panel, that was just over the car. Just didn't have it. The 383 was reliable. It'd fire up every time. It ran decent, but it wasn't fast. It wasn't making a ton of power, and it was tired. So I was just turned off by it. So I put the car up for sale. So this guy calls me from, ironically, the Hesperia, Apple Valley area, and is interested in the Roadrunner. And but he didn't have any money to buy it. And so he says, "Hey, I got a bunch of Mopar stuff. I'd be willing to do a trade. Would you be willing to trade?" And I said, "Well, yeah, maybe. Well, what do you have?" And of course, my favorite car of all time is second-gen Chargers, so there's always this gleaming hope that somebody's actually going to trade a Charger for a Roadrunner. But anyways, he didn't have a Charger. He listed off a bunch of stuff. It was like darts and dusters and Dodge trucks, D100s and stuff. And I'm like, no, not really interested in that. And then he finally offers up his ace in the hole, which is a 69 Roadrunner. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in that. And so he says it's a pretty solid car. No engine or trans in the car. It's in, pretty nice shape. So he wants me to come and look at the car. Or he shoots me a picture of the car. And so I'm like, all right. And he wants to see the Roadrunner. So I met him, I can't remember where it's at, the area, but it's not all the way into the desert. I went like 3/4 of the way, and then he drove down because he was working. He's a tow truck driver, and met with me and checked out the Roadrunner, my Roadrunner. So he was interested in it, and he's like, when he saw the car, he's like, I know this car. I've actually tried to buy this car several times, and the guy wouldn't sell. So he's like, he was surprised that it was up for sale and that he never saw the ad. But at any rate, he was really interested in the car. So it was like, all right, cool. So since he was working, I couldn't go look at his car, so I had to go up there a second time. I go up there the second time. I'm going up to see the Roadrunner. That's all I'm interested in, is the 69 Roadrunner. And of course, takes me to this yard where his dusters and his darts and his trucks are and stuff. And I'm just like, nah, I'm not interested in all that stuff, dude. And so finally he takes me to his house, and inside there's the 69 Roadrunner. And I'm like, all right, I mean, my car runs, his car doesn't run. You know, his car looks like it's been taken apart and it's been, sitting a while, and it needs everything. But it doesn't have flares in the back wheel wells, and it doesn't have hacked wheel wells, it doesn't have a hacked quarter panel on the car. So he wanted to do a straight across trade, and so I was willing to do that, so we made the trade. So I get the 69 bird home, and of course, one of the first things you want to find out is everything you can about the car. Luckily, the car had its fender tag still, so I was able to find out the car is a Q5 turquoise, seafoam turquoise color, and it was actually a cruise control car, which I didn't even realize that they had cruise control in 69. All that stuff was, of course, missing, and the original paint was painted over with a very heavy flake, what looked like a B5 blue. The paint job was not that great of condition. The rear quarter panels had been replaced on the car before, and it was kind of a hack job too, but still better than the 70 Roadrunner. So I stripped the engine compartment, I primed it, I repainted the engine bay B5 blue, and I painted the jambs, and I painted the trunk area B5 blue. So I find this ad for a 440 crate motor for sale. It was like $2,500. The guy had two engines. One was $2,500. The other one was $1,500 or so. And back then, this is 2002. Mopar Performance was actually offering long block crate engines, but I think they were around $7,500. So I thought, man, this is pretty cheap. So I give the guy a call, and he says, "Oh, it's not one of the Mopar Performance crate engines. This is actually a factory replacement engine. It was a warranty engine for an RV that had never been ran." And I thought, oh, okay, well, big difference in price. So I said, well, I'm not really interested in paying that kind of money for an engine. And he goes, well, just come on down and have a look at it and make me an offer on the thing. And I said, all right. So I go out there, I'm looking at it, and he said that the guy that he got the motor from used to work at a Dodge dealership, and this motor had come in, and I guess it had been sitting in the corner of the shop for years, since 1977. And so that guy ended up with the motor. He put gear oil down the cylinders to keep everything lubricated so it doesn't rust, and he held on to it all these years until he finally sold it to this guy. So he says, it's never been ran, and sure enough, you could see on the exhaust manifolds it still had blue overspray on the manifolds the paint had never burned off of it. So this thing was pretty much a brand new engine. I put a 474 lift purple shaft cam into it, went with headers on it, went with an RPM Edelbrock intake manifold dual plane, and the thing was a cast crank, and I dropped it into the car. So prior to buying the Roadrunner or trading for it, I had picked up this 68 Dodge Coronet that was wrecked. I saw the ad. I think it was $600. I called the guy. He was firm on the price. It was his father-in-law's car. It was a running, driving car until he ran it off the road and rolled it into a ditch. So I bought it for the 383 to put into my 68 Coronet. I ended up using the seats from this car to put into my Roadrunner, and I took the 8 3/4 out and put it into my Roadrunner. So I got the 440 running, had I think it was a 750 Demon Carb on it, and I had adjustable rocker arms on it, and I took it around the block, and it was just, the valve train was rattling around, making all kinds of noise. And I guess I had not set the rockers right, the adjustable rockers, which I think is kind of hard to do on a hydraulic cam. So anyway, I pulled the valve cover. Sure enough, everything was all, jacked up. I bent a couple of push rods and stuff. So I was over it, ripped all the adjustable shit out of it, and I put a stock rocker arms and push rods into the engine and slapped it back together and took it around the block again. Now I'm paranoid, and I can hear this knock. It's like a knock in the engine. It was only there at idle, which didn't make sense to me because it felt like it sounded like a rod was knocking, and I'm like, just pissed and disgusted because I just put all this time and money into this car to get it running, and then, to have it have a rod knocking was just really demoralizing. So anyway, I was pissed and I said, screw it. I'm taking this thing out. I'm just gonna blow the motor out. Like, I don't care. I'm so mad. So I take it out on the street and I start roasting the tires on this thing and hauling ass. And of course, when the engine's revved up, there's no knock. It's only when I get out of it and I'm at idle, you hear this just knocking sound. And I'm like, what the hell? It doesn't make any sense, because if it was a rod knocking, it would be getting worse at higher RPMs and less or not at all at idle. So it didn't make any sense. I drove the car home. I'm like trying to listen, like, man, what the heck? Where's it coming from? Is it coming from the top end, the bottom end, or whatever? So I put the car up on jack stands and I fire it up and I crawl under the car, and I noticed the header was super close to the driver torsion bar. And the thing was just sitting there and it was knocking on the torsion bar. So I took a crescent wrench and I pried it between the torsion bar and the header, and sure enough, the knock went away. So I was like, oh, it's just the header hitting the torsion bar. So I was good. So I was pretty happy about that. The knock was annoying, but I got used to it and drove the piss out of that car. So around this time, I was working down in San Diego, and my buddy that I worked with got me into going at the track down at Qualcomm Stadium. And so I had a 79 Dodge truck with a 360 in it, had 318 heads on it. I got it to go as fast as 9.1 in the 8th mile. This isn't killer fast, but it was a lot of fun, especially when you're racing against other vehicles that are basically street cars. So around the same time is when I started to finish up the Road Runner. I might add that when I was working down there in San Diego, I actually got laid off. So I was unemployed for about 6 months. So in that 6 months time is when I started putting the Road Runner together. So anyway, racing the truck, got the Road Runner done, took the Road Runner to the track, and right out the gate, the Road Runner was going like, I think 8.6 in the 8th. So it was about a half second faster than the truck. And so I was like, well, I had all these dreams and aspirations to lighten up the truck and make it go faster, but I was pretty much done because it was just so heavy. It weighed around 4,000 pounds with me in it. And the Road Runner was just already so much quicker. There was really no point. So I just started running the Road Runner from that point on, which was a lot of fun. Anyway, my buddy talked me into getting some weight scales. So we bought some scales. I weighed the car. It weighed in at 3,400 pounds. And I think, yeah, there was this Fox body Mustang. We had the scales with us at the track. And he's like, hey, can I weigh my car too? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So, Fox body Mustang next to a Road Runner, it's pretty puny. But we weighed the thing, and his Mustang weighed 3,400 pounds, and my Road Runner weighed 3,400 pounds. So I was pretty surprised that those little cars were that heavy and that my big Road Runner was actually that light. So anyways, we had a lot of fun with that car. I ended up racing once at Irwindale, which is a much nicer track than Qualcomm and stickier. And the Road Runner ran an 8.1 just because the car was hooking up. And I remember the first pass I made, it made these like 3 violent bangs under the car, and I thought, holy shit, I thought something let go. But I get back into the return lanes, get into the pit area, and I'm crawling under the car. I can't find anything wrong with the car, and just realized that it was just the car was hooking so hard that the pinion snubber was coming up and smacking the body, because I had the car so low that the pinion didn't have to travel very far before it hit the body. But it's the first time it ever hit like that. So the car, based on its ET and its weight, I think it was making around 390 horse or so. So we're not talking like a huge horsepower car or anything, but ton of fun on the street. I mean, you could drive the car anywhere. It was super reliable, and take it to the track and have fun racing other street cars. So as you could see, the Road Runner's on the rough side. So I was doing that ratty muscle car thing long before it was ever popular, as I'm sure many other guys were doing. It was called being broke. But anyways, later on I finished my 68 Cornet, which I built very, very similar to my Road Runner because I liked the Road Runner so much. The only difference was, it had a steel crank in it, and I put RPM heads, but I used the same intake, same carburetor, well, I've had TTI headers on that car, so it was essentially the same car, only nice. So I got to a point where I had two cars that were more or less the same thing, and the Road Runner was just ready to go on to the next phase, which should have been a restoration, but I just wasn't going to dump the money into it because I had Chargers I'd rather put the time and money into. So I pulled the drivetrain out, and I sold the car through a buddy of mine who, his buddy was a Road Runner guy, especially 69s. Anyways, as a thanks, he had a 69 Charger he gave to my buddy. My buddy was a Charger guy like I am. And so it kind of worked out, I guess. I ended up taking that drivetrain. After getting rid of the Road Runner, I really missed that car. There are some big differences. I mean, I could take the Road Runner and just thump on it. I could park it anywhere, not worry about it getting scratched. I wasn't really too worried about wrecking the car. I mean, it would have sucked, but it would have sucked more wrecking the Coronet than the Road Runner. So I still thump on the Coronet, but not, there's a little hesitation because it's like you don't want to wreck this car. The Road Runner, I didn't really care about. I didn't care about wrecking. I mean, I cared about it, but I didn't have that same level of fear. So anyways, the car's gone. I have a lot of regret losing that car. I should have kept it. Unfortunately, that's the thing about mistakes, is until you make them, you don't really realize they're a mistake. So I wish I still kept that car. It was running and driving, and it ran good. It was super reliable, and it was quick for the street. Anyways, I ended up taking that drivetrain and dropping it into my 69 Coronet wagon, which is rough, probably rougher than the Road Runner was. So it's like I'm trying to get the Road Runner back through another car. And we'll see how that goes. It is what it is. So don't make the same mistake. Don't sell your car. Anyway, years go by. My buddy that got that 69 Charger, he calls me up, or he texted me actually, and he said, hey, and he shot me a picture of a 67 Newport that he wanted to buy. He said, if you buy me this car, I'll give you the 69 Charger. So it was pretty much a no-brainer. The Newport was $2,400. So I bought it for him. He gave me the Charger, and now I got this 69 Charger, and it's probably about as rough as the 69 Road Runner was. So it's like I kind of got my car back, but as a Charger instead of a Road Runner. So full circle. Anyways, that's the story of the 69 Road Runner.